Hi everyone, my name is Mikhail Rodin. This is a прошлое project, that means the past. Today we are in Israel. I am going to Negev Desert. We will talk about very interesting but not well known period of Israel history. This is the Byzantine period, when Jerusalem and numerous settlements on sacred journey roads flourished. Pilgrims from all over the world came here and spent their money here and grew up economy of the region. Numerous settlements of Negev Desert flourished because of the pilgrims who had come to Sinai Peninsula to look at the burning bush. Vibrant life of Near East of the middle of first millennium preserved in this place.
Basically, this is one of the most important sites to understand the transition between the political rule, Byzantine and Islamic, the religious transition between Christianity and Islam. So this is the first time when real scientific excavation is taking place with the new methodologies and with the research question that might be important not only for this particular site or the Negev, but they have a very large context of, I even would say, the whole Near East, to understand what happened here in the 200 years between the 6th century and the 8th century, as a part of actually a global transformation. If you look at the whole Near Eastern area, if you look at Eurasia, if you look at Europe, this affected the history of a very, very large region. So this small site in a quite remote place has a very large, significant, I even would say, to world history.
Some of the settlements of the highlands of Negev were established along the Innocence route held by Nabateans, but it seems that Nitsana is not one of them. We have, for now, after hundreds of years of excavations and 2 archaeological expeditions working here, we have practically no archaeological finds related to this early period, to the Nabateans. The earliest architecture and earliest material finds, pottery, stamped amphora handles from abroad, from across the sea, are dated to the 2nd century BC. It seems that the place started to develop in a proper way after the establishment of the Roman garrison on the top of the mountain over there, and start to blossom only with Christianization during the Byzantine period, from the 5th century on. The top period, the summit of development of Nessana is 6th, 7th century CE, when it's turned to very important hub on the roads of Christian pilgrims moving from the Holy Land to Sinai, to Santa Catarina Monastery, located in 5 days away from here. The desert road is a difficult one, a harsh one, and it seems that Nessana becomes a sort of the last point of the inhabited land where people prepare themselves to this long journey, forming the caravans, resting, preparing all the logistic stuff for this voyage, and from here on moving to the Sinai.
Today, the Negev Desert is far from being an isolated part of the world. Before the Hamas invasion in 2023, more than 700,000 people lived here, spread across approximately 150 settlements, kibbutzim, and large greenhouses stand within walking distance of Nessana.
Okay, so the site of Nitsana is divided into two parts. It's divided by Azuz river just west east of us, and this river divides the site into a lower site and an upper site on top of the natural hill behind me. This natural hill goes up to 35 meters above the natural surrounding. And in order to reach the top of this hill, the builders of the site built a gigantic, enormous staircase. When the site was excavated in the late 1980s and beginning of the 1990s by Ben-Gurion University and Dan Urman, they wanted to date this staircase. So during the excavation of the staircase, they dated it according to coins to the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, which means the Hellenistic period. During the previous excavations of the site, they figured out that on top of the upper city of Nitsana, the Romans in the late Roman period established a fortress. It was used also by the Byzantines. Who were the soldiers that settled here, we still do not know. If there were soldiers that were connected to a certain legion or to some kind of a unit that supported the legions, we still do not know. And then in the Byzantine period, we have here also two churches. One of them was used as a monastery on the northern part of the site.
The interesting thing is that no large-scale excavations have been carried out here. That is, some individual sites were excavated, but long ago. We had no idea of how the stero should look, what was the layer thickness, and what kind of planography the city had. That is, if the upper town was measured, we drew its plans, did the drawings, but the lower town is like an unknown land. Some streets are traced, there are photos and plans. We filmed it all in advance, but we haven't approached it with modern methods yet. It turns out that everything we're doing now is the discovery of a new, unknown Nessana.
It has very complicated post-ancient history. That's why for very long time the archaeologists avoided. Not enough that the results of the last excavations were unknown and still unpublished, also thanks to the events of the 20th century that ruined a site in a very serious way. The problem is that in early 19th, the place was turned by Ottoman authorities to some sort of administrative center with a railway and even railway station built by many forced laborers, and very soon it became an important military center because of the beginning of the Great War and the close positions of British Army guarding the Suez Canal on the other side of the Sinai Desert. And this military center, al-Hafir, practically used most of the building stones of the Byzantine Nessana. That's why the walls were robbed. The best stones were reused in Ottoman structures. And as it seems to us today, they not only use the building stones, but they generally followed the main axis of the planning of the ancient settlement. So the remains of their structures are in certain way helping us to reconstruct the original plan of the ancient Nitsana. And we hope to reconstruct also some of this al-Hafir because in 1950s it was demolished by the Israeli army. So ancient city was demolished thrice. First by time and natural erosion. Second, when the Ottoman settlement al-Hafir was built. And third time, when al-Hafir was destroyed. So all this adds complicity to our work. It only seems that the ruins are standing freely in the empty place, but in the reality, the site formation of Nitsana is a very complicated process.
But despite all these shocks, there is still much to see here, so archaeologists have to give tours to tourists almost every day. Everyone who sees Nitsana for the first time are excited by the ruins on the top of the hill. Here lie the remains of an ancient city in the heart of the desert. However, the irony is that these are actually the most modern ruins in Nitsana. The structure was built by the Turkish authorities on the eve of the World War I. It was later abandoned and fell into ruin. So it's a little over 100 years old. But in my opinion, Nitsana is fortunate to have these buildings because it provides an understandable and clear picture of the site. If you are not an archaeologist visiting an ancient city, you expect to see the walls, not just spots on the ground.
Comparing to Jerusalem, it's look poor. It's also look very simple archaeologically comparing to Jerusalem. There are not that many phases, not much to do. Any student can understand which one of the three walls is the earliest, which one is the latest. It's not very complicated. But for me, as for the researcher who study the Byzantine period, early Christianity and pilgrimage, this is a key site comparable to Jerusalem in a certain extent. First of all, we have no other place in the Holy Land like Nitsana so well covered by written evidence. You can compare it actually only to Jerusalem. We don't have the description of this site left by pilgrims of the past, but we have the documents from here and the inscriptions from here. I see a straight connection, at least in the fields that I study, between this site and Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the center of the Holy Land, the holy city of the Holy Land, the heart of the Christian world. But here you can take a very interesting example of the settlement that grew thanks to Jerusalem, actually, generally speaking. Yeah, the miracles that happened in Jerusalem gave this place its best time, its best life, its growth thanks to Christian faith of the people of ancient times. And it seems to me that it's a super interesting site. Besides, unlike in Jerusalem, the desert conditions of Nessana preserve the organic materials very well. That's why the papyri survived. We already have some finds of textile, cordage, basketry, things that you cannot find in humid places like Jerusalem. And that's also attracts me very much. For me, it's a key site of the Byzantine pilgrimage. I came here for this.
The first excavations in Nitsana took place in the 1930s by an expedition, American expedition led by Colt. During the excavations in the upper parts of the city, of the site, they uncovered remains of papyri, written in a few languages, and we have to mention among the languages Greek, of course, Latin, and Aramaic, Syrian Aramaic. Those are administrative texts that speak about taxes, about exporting and importing products, and about the sites.
It seems that it was a commercial point, yeah, that's the commerce around the pilgrimage, that's what gave the main boost to the economic development of the place. There is an agricultural crops around, there are fields and small farms all over with fruit trees and various crops, but it seems that the agriculture itself was never the main focus of the economic activity of the city. The wine, the barley, and other cultures cultivated here perhaps were enough for the residents themselves and for their guests coming here on seasonal ground, because we know that the main pilgrimage season was around Easter, more or less, March, April. Most of the pilgrims came to the Holy Land to celebrate the Easter here in Jerusalem, and all these journeys were somehow arranged around the Easter season. But it's hard to believe that the production of these agricultural crops could help this little place in the middle of nowhere to develop that well, that it will afford to build itself 6 churches. Enormous number, even for the peak of the Byzantine period. First of all, the papyri are talking about pilgrims' hospices, at least 2 or 3 within the limits of the city. There is no place on the mountain, so we believe that most of this infrastructure built for pilgrims was located here on the footsteps of the hill. We do have numerous parallels to such structures, mainly from Jordan. We know that sometimes they were located beside the monasteries or within the monasteries, because by 6th, 7th century all the issues related to pilgrimage were in the hands of the local churches. They were running this pilgrims traffic, they provide the services, guiding, feeding, praying, and so on, and even burial services if there was a need. And we do have structures similar to medieval Hans. You know, usually it's square structure with rooms around and some empty large courtyard for animals, something of this kind. We do know that during the Byzantine period, one of the important things, one of the most important services around in these places were bathhouses. Because imagine, in a late spring, April, May, around Easter, it's already incredibly hot here. So monasteries that never build bathhouses for themselves, for their own use, do provide such a service to pilgrims. So we hope to find some bathhouse also around. And we do have already some hints to the existence of this bathhouse because we keep finding ceramic water pipes used usually for such a purpose.
Another settlement shifter provides general idea of the level of comfort that greeted pilgrims in Nessana, as well as how the city looked and how it was supplied with food. Its ruins are more fortunate and much better preserved.
What is this niche? I don't know what the alcove is, but you know why I like this building? Its original ceiling. I mean, we're seeing now how ceilings were covered in the Byzantine times. There was no wood, only stone. What did they come up with? They made arches quite close to each other. And they covered them with stone slabs. That's how they got the second floor. And the funny thing is, at the excavation unit you were digging yesterday, we came up with just this kind of stone, this one. So we have about 4 more blocks to go down. So there was a room like this down there. Maybe there will be some ornamentation down there, because sometimes they have ornamented blocks. Do you know what this niche is? Can you guess? To feed and to water the horses. I mean, they'd stand on both sides and eat out of one alcove. Polychrome mosaic. How many colors? White, yellow, red, pink, purple, blue.
You know, the key to survival anywhere, and especially in the desert here, is water. And we find evidence for some of the ways that they collected water in the city. So over there you have a very large water pool. But in here, and this is common in most domestic dwellings, you have a water hole. And you can see how it was collected with some of these channels that collect the rainwater and bring them into the cistern. So I'm just showing that there's one conduit channel down here and another one up here. And we need to climb up the steps, and it seems to have something to do with the church up here. So let's go. This collects water, and I believe it collects water going all the way to from the outside of the site, coming into here. And then
It's right in the church?
This is the church behind us, yeah. This is the church, yeah. And there's another one here. This is the cistern. So presumably the water comes in, fills up the cistern, goes down to that conduit we saw, and then fills up other parts. And another place where you need water is right over here. This is the baptisterium. You can see in the shape of a cross with steps going down. And so this is where, residents of Shifta would have been baptized some 1,500 years ago. Yeah, if you look inside this cistern, there happens to be a pigeon, a bird, nesting inside. And that's important to the story of the agricultural history of this region, the agricultural success. Huh? It went down. Hey. Cuckoo, cuckoo. So in the Byzantine period, you had special towers called columbaria for growing these pigeons in this region. And the reason why they wanted to grow these pigeons was for this thing right here. This is the pigeon poo, the pigeon droppings, which, according to Pliny and some of the other Columella, is some of the best fertilizer for grapes, for vineyards.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the desert, to have agriculture, you need water, you need soil, you need fertilizer. So this was the fertilizer. And this is exciting because for 150 years, this area, the agriculture in this area has been a topic of study. And a lot of work has been done understanding the hydrology of the Negev agricultural system in the Byzantine period, and we'll see some examples of that in just a minute. But now we also get to see not only, what was the infrastructure, but what was the content? What were they eating? What were they growing? What were they trading? And I just want to also mention, this is important, that this was part, this research in which I did my PhD was part of a wider project looking at these sorts of questions called the Negev Biz project, headed by Guy Bar-Oz of the University of Haifa, with many other partners.
So what the late Romans and the Byzantines, inhabitants of these areas did, is they used the lower parts of the rivers, as you can see here and in the one behind you. They established terrace walls and dams from unworked stones, and separated the river beds into small agricultural fields, small agricultural fields. They planted the plants there. They used the soil from the garbage from the pigeons, and also the plants got all the rich soil from the river itself. And also you can, when you see those dams or terrace walls, you can see that they also installed in some of them drainage systems. So the water and the minerals can go from each terrace to the next one. In order to bring more water and direct them to the fields down in the rivers, they used to go to the slopes of the hills and to the upper parts of the hills and to collect the stones. So they wanted to make larger surfaces on top of the hills and on the slopes in order to collect more water. So they collected the stones. You can see those piles in front of us. And then after doing this, they used to build a set of water channels from the upper parts of the hill down towards the agricultural fields in order to direct the water towards the agricultural fields down in the rivers itself.
But we're just looking at the water. There's quite a large capacity for collecting water in this cistern. We were also noticing the plaster, which is probably Byzantine.
Is it handmade?
Yeah, that's what he was saying, that this rock is very soft and it's easy to carve it, yeah. Now, if we look at the three main cultivated crops, barley, wheat, and grape, and we compare their relative frequencies, okay, their quantities, we see that in the earlier period, there's almost no grapes. And by the Middle Byzantine period, very significant quantities of grapes. And then in the Late Byzantine period, it declines. And in Shifta, at least, it stays that way in the early Islamic period as well. In Nitsana is a different story. But the important point is that the quantitative data of the seeds enabled us to track the rise and fall of viticulture, of grape growing in this desert region. And this was part of a wider industry of wine, which was exported from the big coastal ports in Gaza and Ashkelon throughout the Mediterranean. And we know this from the pottery, so-called Gaza wine jars, which have been found all over the Mediterranean, as far away as Great Britain, Sweden, and Yemen on the other side. So the Negev highlands was also part of this industry. And that industry reached its peak in the mid-6th century, which was a period of climate change, plague, and social political turmoil associated with the end of the Justinianic era.
Shifta was the penultimate stop for pilgrims before the Sinai Desert. And Nessana was right on the edge of it. As a result, efficient agriculture was not possible there. But there was enough grain and wine to feed the pilgrims, and the role of such a tourist hub turned Nessana into a truly international religious center.
Nitsana is a very special place. In 6th, 7th century, we have, beside the papyri, an epigraphic written evidence on few languages, no doubt left by pilgrims themselves. It's hard to imagine that in 6th or 7th century there were an Armenian or Georgian quarters here, but we do have inscriptions left by pilgrims from these far places that most probably were passing by and left their marks. One Armenian, perhaps a priest, sign on the door jamb of one of the churches saying, "Koryun, who pass by, pray." Also the papyri were written in different languages. The main language, of course, is Greek, lingua franca of the Byzantine Palestine, but there are some texts also in Arabic and in Christian Palestinian Aramaic, one of the late variations of local Aramaic language. These texts are mainly unpublished till now, and the big group of the researchers now is actually working on them. Among them are the Arabic texts, one of the earliest Arabic texts written in Palestine itself, which is incredibly important. We also have information regarding the soldiers of this late Roman, early Byzantine garrison. We know that there was a troop of camel riders among them, which suits the desert very much. So all this together, plus the building inscriptions, plus burial inscriptions discovered in the surroundings and in the cemeteries, 4 cemeteries of Nessana, give us a picture of a very vivid, very multilingual, multinational hub, which you would not expect to see in the place like that really stands in the middle of nowhere. Now it's the middle of nowhere. Once it was a big and important site. Hard to imagine today. If you add some green to the to the surroundings, all these gardens, orchards, fields, gives you totally different impression. And deserts start immediately beyond it.
Understanding this multicultural essence of the city can be realized by exploring Nessana's many churches.
Nitsana just has a lot. And it's interesting because it's quite a small place. And we know that the possible reason is because it's the last station, the stop before you go into the desert on your pilgrimage to Sinai. So we think it has something to do with that because there's a lot of visitors here. Maybe the changes are because different communities need different facilities for their service, perhaps. Maybe it's just a matter of amounts of people. Maybe it's too crowded. We don't know. That's a part of what I'm hoping I will try to understand in my research. If a certain ceremony involves walking around something, or you stand and look and listen. So that's a change that comes from the needs of the community. So that's what I'm trying to understand, because all of these are little pieces of a puzzle that hopefully at the end we'll see the big picture. What we have for sure is a small chapel. What we hope to find out is whether it is a part of a larger church that chapel is a side chapel of, or maybe a larger structure of some sort like a monastery that's a chapel of, and how it's connected to the other areas of this site, because the pottery we have is from a period of time that's very hard to be specific about. End of Byzantine, early Islamic. And that's the story of this site.
Indeed, the ceramics recovered from local excavations highlight Nessana as an important international center. This becomes evident every evening when the experts sort through the day's finds.
Did they really have pots with steam channels? Yes, they have special holes in the lids, tubes. Oh, lacquered pottery. We'll collect the lacquered.
Now we will explain. That's pottery reading. First of all, we divide indicative sherds and non-indicative. Indicative sherds are those that can tell us which vessel it is. This one, for example, is a casserole of late antiquity. 2 handles, that's the diameter. This one is a storage jar from Gaza. This one is some sort of amphora. Frying pan. Here we insert a wooden handle and the pan itself is here. And those 3 nice sherds are imported from Cyprus or from North Africa. We have plenty of this stuff in Israel.
It is even better demonstrated in the lectures from Yana at the expedition base. It is important for people who are digging the site to understand the sherds of what pottery they might find.
By the way, they're found all over the world. They're also found in the Black Sea region and many, many other places. What is the shape of the lamp and what is its purpose? They are apparently used as a Jerusalem souvenir of a certain time because they have inscriptions of a very specific nature on them, such as, "The light of Christ shines to all." Ah, so they were already making souvenirs as they do now. Of course! And then it all blossoms into a lush flower. What do they write on them? Towards the end, they say things like Basmala and stuff like that. And sometimes here it says, "Good lamps." I mean, that's advertising, isn't it? We haven't found this one in Nessana yet, but you have to look for them actively. Are these pilgrimage souvenirs? Yes, they're pilgrimage ampules. The ampules are very small vessels for liquids such as water or oil.
It is not surprising that a multicultural city is being explored by an international expedition, in which at least 3 languages are spoken: Russian, English and Hebrew.
On the floor, actually. ותיקחו כבר את הגובה של הרצפה המשוערת. איפה רצפה משוערת?
הסלע זה לא עומד על הרצפה אבל? יאנה.
לא, זה כבר נמוך יותר. תן לה את הרצפה.
איפה אני אתן לה את הרצפה?
איפה? תמצא את הרצפה.
מה, אבל להחזיק את זה באוויר?
כן.
Where did Svetlana find the coin? What type of construction is it? That's a good question what this construction is. It's a large church complex. Sveta found the coin next to the chapel wall. But in another room. And what that room is, what the facility is, we don't understand yet. But eventually, it will come together and we'll understand everything. Except what we will not understand.
לא נכון! לא נכון! First season that we made in summer, we opened few trenches. One of them here, close to the chapel. And here we have a wonderful archaeological context of collapse of the second floor of the building. It's very difficult to excavate, but it's the richest context, especially regarding the organic finds. Last summer we found plenty of stuff here. According to the law of National Parks Authority, we have to close the squares, so we fill them back with our earth. And nowadays we are reopening them. We're actually excavating what was already excavated and now coming to the layer where we stopped half a year ago. In these 2 squares, they are already in this new context. We will start to sift all the material now, looking for small finds, textile and stuff. Here is the rounded wall of the apse of the church. Some of the pavement is still, stone pavement is still seen. And all the other squares is a continuation of the same complex, looking a very impressive, very large complex. Perhaps it's a monastery, perhaps it's a large church with a monastery. I hope that by the end of the season we will know more. For now we are only covering more and more walls. General plan will follow. Here is the water well. Perhaps we spoke about the irrigation system and about the water supply in Nessana. Here is one of the wells. The actual well that we are looking at is British, but originally it's Byzantine. For now, we start to think that the original Byzantine well was located in the middle of some courtyard, perhaps an atrium of the church, which is funny, yeah, because we look at it as something modern, and now apparently it's closely related to what we are finding in the earth, so it's ancient. We have to move it from the 20th century to the 6th, 7th century. We use all the traditional forms of archaeological works, which is a survey, a simple survey. We are walking around and looking for the walls. We are lucky because most of the places, the walls are quite close to modern surface. For example, just half an hour ago, I found one more wall. Here is it. Can you see the line? Yes. Yeah. So this line from south to north, approximately, that's a normal orientation of all the walls that we see here. So here's one more wall, probably making a corner with the walls exposed in these new squares. The idea is to bring it all together. So we are simply walking around and documenting the walls on the surface, and then we do orthophotography and all this ortho models of the surroundings, also trying to decide which areas will be most fruitful for the excavation. Our target is not to excavate everything. It's something that archaeologists are trying not to do nowadays, because the whole process is a kind of destructive work. No one will be able to recheck the results of our excavations. So we are planning to work in small trenches, in small areas, open there and here, specifying various issues that interest us. Unfortunately, the magnetic radars and ground penetrating radars are not working well at this specific site because of the modern history of the site. It's full of concrete, full of iron, including bullets and iron armature of concrete structures, bombs, mines, and stuff like that. So all the radars are helpless here. On a difference of other Negev sites where these technologies are working well, we try, I think, 4 times here. They give up in the end. Of course, we are working with different specialists in very specific narrow fields of archaeological knowledge, which is archaeobotanics, that you met already, geologists, and other specialists.
At first, we thought it was like Shifta, a neighboring Byzantine village. There were houses that were used for burning garbage. That is, they were filled with garbage, and it either burned or smoldered there. So there were large layers of burned garbage, ceramics, and some organic remains. And we thought it would be the same here, but there is no bottom, no other walls, and there is no set passage. Nothing matches. We know nothing.
Nikita Saveliev is one of many Russian archaeologists who work at this site. He has a lot of experience of excavations in Russia, but each soil, each site is its own methodology. So for an archaeologist, the learning process never ends.
It really is a strange instrument, but those who work in Central Asia will probably recognize it. That's called a ketman, or a hoe in English. It is good exactly for such desert sandy loam which has shriveled up, mixed with such construction debris which our classic shovels can't move. That is, you can dig, but it will be endless, excruciating work, even with some good and expensive shovels. But the ketman is perfect. If I were to break up this pile of earth with a shovel, I would chisel hard for a long time. But this tool is convenient. With its side like this one time and then the other, we'll take it apart. There is no backfill here. This is also unusual for a Russian archaeologist. Here, if you look at the sides, there is no backfill. That's because it's neatly collected in the bucket and then taken away. Here is an amazing thing. I mean, when you come here for the first time, it seems like you're on a dig somewhere in the Soviet Union in 1965. A leveling rod, and that's it. We don't see anything being photographed with cameras. We don't see any copters, and it seems like a pretty primitive process. We don't do cleanings of each layer, as is customary in Russian archaeology. There is no special photographer walking around taking pictures of every square and layer. But this is a deceptive feeling. Here, on the contrary, the recording is so high-tech that it is simply not necessary. There is no need to run around with a camera all the time. You don't need a special person standing with a leveler all the time. It is all so digitized. If you look at the desk where Anat works, there is a tablet. The tablet has a special program. This program is designed specifically for archaeology. This is how it all works. If, in Russian archaeology, we're used to having 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, we go down 20 centimeters at a time. The sterile is cleaned, the pits are selected, the sides are cleaned and photographed. Yay! Goodbye. It's a little different here. A system of so-called loci has been developed here. That is, loci is such a comprehensive concept for local archaeology. That is, I'm in a room, so I am in a locus. This room is a separate locus. The hearth also is a locus. I took apart the hearth, its occupancy. That is also a separate locus. So, it's hard to imagine, but there are thousands of these loci. All of them are immediately entered into the program and recorded on the plan. Yes, there is a parallel recording on the paper plan, by hand, and there are no problems afterwards. The depth is recorded there. The soil composition is recorded. It is also recorded where the samples come from. The second is the baskets. Baskets contain material from loci. And there are also 2 buildings, locus, basket, locus, basket. These baskets are taken to the camp. After the work, we sort out the already washed pottery found on the previous day. We identify it by type, look at the composition, and immediately record it in the computer. The data from the tablet is already synchronized with the computer. And at once, it is all written down. Byzantium, tearpot, kitchen vessel, pot, handle, Roman plate. It is all tied to the locus by symbols. It turns out that the report, in our understanding, when we have already processed the material, when we have made the final drawing, is made immediately in the course of excavations. This is how the work with drawing goes, for example. Every week, a man with a drone comes in and does photogrammetry. It is perfectly tied to the markers. They're painted here in red paint. And he proceeds write the next day the final version of the drawing. Perfectly accurate, geo-referenced. All the loci are transferred to these drawings. That's it. By the end of the season, we have an illustrative part of the report almost completed. The smallest things are left to encrypt the finds and prepare them for the deposit. This is, of course, a completely unfamiliar system. I mean, it looks very simple, like this tool. But in fact, we, at least I, have something to learn from the Israeli archaeologists, because this is so unusual. And of course, we have to learn these programs, perhaps to bring in something we know how to do. For example, at some points it is more convenient to dig with shovels, and we're even trying to convince local archaeologists of this. And we even succeed. This year, we have as many as 2 shovels, and even 3 shovels at the excavation. Is it true that before you came here, they didn't even know the word shovel? Here, yes. There was a story. A guy was cleaning the walls with a shovel. A local girl comes up and says, "Do you clean the walls with a shovel too?" Yana heard the question. She says they do everything with these shovels. They can catch a flying butterfly with that shovel. I mean, they just didn't know the capabilities of these tools. There is just no historical tradition. For example, in Egypt in the 19th century, they used to dig with these leather baskets. Such burden. Then it was reduced to a plastic bucket, like this one. But the essence is the same, and everybody uses the buckets. Oh, ceramics. A layer of destruction. But still, there are ceramics. Yana says there are some rare exceptions, expeditions where they do use shovels.
Not everything is architecture. Part of our work is with sediment, and it's a very important part of the work. Here are the walls, everything is clear about them. Pay attention, there are all these layers of sediment. We excavate them, but now we see them only in the section as they are cut through. So there are layers of this dark gray material, and in between them layers of brownish fill. Apparently these gray layers are full of botanic finds, seeds, stones, and stuff like that. Daniel Fuks is working on flotation of all this material right now. So they are also telling the story of the building, not just the walls, but also sand layers, earthen fields, sometimes pits or garbage pits or sewage pits that cutting through the layers. So while we're excavating, we're not paying attention just on the architecture itself, but also on the sediment. Together they will tell us the story of this building and perhaps of the site.
Welcome to the flotation station in Nitsana, the Nitsana Excavations. This is the sediment sample that we want to float, that we want to retrieve the seeds and other plant remains from. And we've already done some pre-sifting on it, so it's all ready to go into the machine, and we'll see what we get out. So the first step is that we put it here into the first bucket, and maybe I should show you that bucket first. So this bucket is removable, and at the bottom of it, it has a thin mesh screen which catches all the material, all the heavy residue. Now I'm taking a little bit of the water out so that it doesn't all float right away and go out. What we want to happen is the sediment will dissolve into the water, and the plant remains that we're interested will rise to the top and then come out through this nozzle as we pump more water into the first bucket. Okay, and Ranak here just did a very important thing. She put the label on, without which we have no archaeology, no research. Okay, so come see how this goes in. Okay, so I'm pouring it in gently, slowly, close to the surface. I'm trying to avoid it all going in one spot. There we go. Okay, and if you take a look, you can see already, right away, lots of beautiful black gold ancient plant remains are rising to the surface. And so what we're going to be doing now is trying to get them all to go out onto this net right here. And then we will eventually look at them, analyze them in the lab to find out what the people of Nitsana were eating and growing and so on, and what the natural vegetation was like as well. So this is the pump. It's called a hand pump system, so it doesn't require any electricity. And we pump it up, and then as I pump it up, you'll see here that the water level rises, and the material that floats to the top is coming out through this pipe. I'm just helping the material go along into where it needs to go, rather than getting stuck on the sides. So if you look up here closely, we can already see, begin to look at some of the seeds. So this looks very much like a lentil seed, half actually, a lentil cotyledon. And I saw earlier a barley grain. Let me see if I can get one out now. Actually, barley is one of the most common. So that's a barley grain right there that someone ate over 1,000. Well, somebody didn't eat because that's why it's here. but it was deposited over 1,000 years ago. So here we have a sample. This is the heavy residue, all drying, and it looks basically dry. Probably tomorrow we'll pack it up. And this is a light fraction sample, another extremely rich sample. And you can see a lot of charcoal, as if it just came out of the fire. And there are plenty of seeds in here as well. And those plant remains, again, will tell us the information we're after when it comes to ancient economy, environment, and in general plant use.
It can be said that the excavations in Nessana are still at the very beginning, but already now they provide a lot of information about the process of Islamization of the region in the 7th, 8th centuries AD.
Previously, the thinking was the Arabs came from the desert, they destroyed everything. We know that this is absolutely wrong. I mean, they didn't destroy anything. But then the continuity is becoming much more complicated because Christians still were living here almost 300 years or 200 years after the Islamic conquest as Christian probably. At the same time, Islam was very gradually penetrating. So it was a kind of balance between the existing Christian population, the new Islamic regime. We don't know if people were converting into Islam or whether other people came from the desert. And this is one of the questions that this excavation should find an answer. How was the process exactly taking place in small particular areas like this? And hopefully this season, the coming seasons, will give us more details about it.
The connection, the physical connection between the Christian nations of the world was some kind of ruined. Part of this Christian world was quickly Islamized. Take Egypt, for example, or Caucasian region, and those coming from the western parts of the empire or from Constantinople area were completely lost the possibility to visit the Holy Land easily. The pilgrimage never stopped, but this great stream of hundreds of thousands of people coming every year, that's all became a far past. So it seems that the role of this settlement, Nessana, slowly decay and people simply left. Till now, we find no signs of violent end, not of this city and not of other settlements over the Negev. It seems that they were shrinking, the population reduced, and in certain stage they were simply left to decay.
I filmed this documentary at the beginning of 2023. Because of the war, the excavations at Nessana stopped, but in February of 25 it resumed. I'm sure the season will bring more information about how pilgrimage was organized in Byzantine times and how cultural changes took place after the Arab conquests.
you.